Hey everyone, Joey here, and before this discussion begins, I do want to say that we recorded this discussion before E3 2021, so we did think before then that this new Donkey Kong game that's been rumored was going to be announced then, but obviously that didn't happen, so if you hear us talk about E3, just know that that didn't happen, obviously. That said, I still decided to keep in the segment where we discuss our predictions for this next Donkey Kong game, because even though it wasn't announced at E3, it might still be happening. Maybe it'll be announced at the next Nintendo Direct. Who knows? Either way, I decided to keep that segment in. But I did have this discussion with my good friend Alan, or as he is known as on Twitch, Alonzo Mega. Today, for Donkey Kong's 40th anniversary, he is live streaming the entirety of Donkey Kong 64, so you should definitely check him out, show him some love, because it's Donkey Kong 64, it's a long game. Please give him some support. Anyway, here is the discussion. Hey everyone, Joey here, and welcome to this interesting GameXplain discussion, because I am joined by my good friend Alan, who is a Donkey Kong Country expert, and I invited him on because I have a surprise for him.
You do?
I do. You'll never guess what I did over the weekend, Alan. I finally decided that I am going to play and beat the Donkey Kong Country Trilogy, which is available on Nintendo Switch Online. I did it over the weekend. I basically did it because, hey, I've been putting it off for my whole life, basically. I decided, hey, why not beat all the entire games? So here we are. I even beat the Donkey Kong Country Land games. I'm just kidding. I didn't. But I did beat the trilogy. And I want to talk about it with someone who has played the games more than I have, which is you.
I'm so proud of you, my boy. Look at you. Finishing Donkey Kong Countries 1, 2, and 3.
That's right, man. And just in time for Donkey Kong Country 3's 25th anniversary later this year. I was tempted to wait to finish that game until later on, but I decided no. I started this, I am going to finish it. But we're also going to talk about, before we get into the Donkey Kong Country discussion, I do want to hint that we are going to talk a little bit about the future of Donkey Kong Country closer to the end of this video. So stay tuned for that, but let's get started with Donkey Kong Country. Now, I've played all the Donkey Kong Country games at some point in life. I never beat them to completion, which is what I did over the weekend. But, you know, some people might debate that I didn't beat them at all because I used save states and I used that rewind feature to death because I'm an adult, guys. I'm sorry. I got duties to perform. I can't just be dying over and over again in Donkey Kong Country. Sometimes I just gotta hit rewind, and, you know, that's okay. But Donkey Kong Country is a great game. Alan, what are your thoughts on the first Donkey Kong Country?
I love the original Donkey Kong Country. It's one of my first gaming memories ever, honestly. Sitting in there and jumping in like as a 3 or 4-year-old playing Jungle Hijinks, like, dude, that's important.
You know, when you said Jungle Hijinks, the music already came up in my head. Like,
it's iconic.
It's iconic. David Wise, his soundtrack is just absolutely iconic, and you're hearing it right now in the middle of this discussion because you can't talk about Donkey Kong Country without talking about the soundtrack. It's atmospheric, it's upbeat, sometimes it's very sinister, sometimes it's very relaxing when we think about the underwater levels. And yeah, this game was just a technical marvel on all fronts on the Super Nintendo. But I will say, after playing all 3 of the games, Donkey Kong Country is probably my least favorite of the trilogy. It's still really good. Yes, it's still very good, very great. But I think it has not really a problem, but it does have that first game of its kind syndrome, where it is a precursor to something greater, you know? I do feel that the levels are very good, but they are very simple. Basically, from left to right, here we go. I wouldn't say it's as creative as the levels in Donkey Kong Country 2, or even the ones in Donkey Kong Country 3, as a matter of fact. And especially during the latter half, I felt that the levels didn't leave the same impression on me as the levels in the first and even second worlds.
You know what? I could agree with you on that, actually. Once you get to, I'd say, like Gorilla Glacier, Kremkrock Industries, Chimp Caverns, and the ending, it feels almost like you're kind of playing like a greatest hits of like the rest of the levels that were earlier introduced. But, you know, it's a little forgettable here and there. I think there's still fun to go through. But yeah, they're not nearly as memorable as the second game or even the third in some regards.
Absolutely, but it's still fantastic, and I do like the little quirks that some levels have within them. And we were just talking about Stop Go Station, a level that will live in infamy because it's the most demonic game of red light, green light I've ever seen in my life. Let's just say that.
It terrified me as a kid. I used to sleep in a big room, very empty big room, and I would finish that level, and I would not be able to sleep at night because of that. I just hear their little shuffling around, and it terrified me.
I will say the controls, I felt like the controls have not aged the best. I think you'll notice transitioning between Country 1 and Country 2 that the controls in Country 2 are far superior than 1. They're tighter. They feel more responsive. I felt like Country 1's controls were more slippery, if you catch my drift.
I think that also has to go with because the environments, since this is the first of its kind of game, a lot of the platforms were kind of hidden by how they placed the level design. So, the game, they 3D render it and then they kind of just slap it into the game. I'm being very, very vague on this. But the platforming there kind of was also an issue because some areas were more of a wall, some areas, were a lot easier to access. So it was a lot of confidence issues because you'd think, oh, Donkey Kong could jump up to here. But then turns out, no, the platform's a little bit higher than you intended. So I feel like, slippery controls on top of that kind of environment kind of lead to a lot of cheap deaths, if you will.
That's for sure.
This game is chock full of them.
It is chock full of cheap deaths, and that's why I'm not ashamed of using that rewind feature. Like, seriously, I can't imagine how much longer it would have taken me to beat in the game without rewind feature. It probably would have taken me 3 times as long because there are quite a lot of cheap deaths, not just in the first game, but I think in the entire trilogy, to be honest. And that, that is part of the challenge of the trilogy, and that's why it's like the games are super short if you use the rewind feature every single time you die, like I did. But that still doesn't take away that they still got pretty good level design. I wouldn't say the most fantastic level design. That'll come later in the series, not much later too. But I also want to talk about the bosses. What I've also noticed about the bosses is that it doesn't seem like they put as much time in the bosses here as they did in the latter games. And we were talking about first of its kind syndrome. A lot of the bosses, I recall, were pretty much bigger versions of standard enemies, with the exception of the giant bird guy, whose name I forget.
Necky,
yes! It literally, I do like how it looks like a literal puppet. Like someone put a live action puppet in there and just threw coconuts at you or whatever. What was it?
One big Muppet.
Yeah. What was it throwing at you again? Eggs? I don't remember, but
I think it was coconuts, if I remember right. I honestly don't remember. I'm usually just so laser focused on taking it out as soon as I can, like speed run that thing as soon as possible. I never get hit by anything because it's very simple. As you said, it's just there's a tire in the middle or something's coming at you at a very slow pace. And that's pretty much every boss up until King K. Rool, which is pretty much a combination of both.
Oh man, let's talk about that King K. Rool boss fight. I'm so glad the rewind.
Iconic.
I'm so glad the rewind feature existed on that. Let me just say, because man, I would have just nearly died in real life trying to beat that thing without it. But yeah, that was for one, Gangplank Galleon's theme, iconic. Absolutely iconic.
Oh yeah.
I love its Smash Bros remix too. Like, I found myself listening to that the other day just because.
I don't think anybody's really affected me more than King K. Rool being in Smash. And I know this is not a Smash video, but it just kind of goes to show how much myself and even a lot of people who had Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, or even 3 had that in their hearts ready for it,
Absolutely.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah, that's a pretty cheery theme to have a final boss to, I would say.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah. It was also interesting how they fooled you. They faked you out with that fake end credits. I'm just like,
no game has done that.
No game except Kojima games every time. But back then it was a first for video games to have fake end credits. I was wondering, why are they giving fake names? Like, this person is not a real person. And then I was on my phone trying to tweet, yo, I just beat Donkey Kong Country 1. Look at how MLG I am. And then all of a sudden the game pops up and I noticed it. I'm so glad I noticed it. Pop back up. I'm like, oh, it's not over. I'm kind of relieved because that was kind of underwhelming. So
God, that's such a good Rare thing to do. That kind of set the tone for like most of what Rare does in the future, up until probably even past Microsoft's purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Like they purposefully tried to fool you. They mocked you. They ridiculed you. But they knew what they were doing, and they knew they were making a good game.
And it feels like the end of this game is the beginning of the next one, Donkey Kong Country 2. Now, that is widely considered to be the best game in the entire trilogy. And yes, that is a correct statement to make, because that game is just downright incredible, especially playing it right after Donkey Kong Country 1, just to feel like how much better the controls are, and how right off the bat, the levels I felt were just more fun to play in general. Like, the hidden secrets were more fun to find, the minigames were more fun to play, and switching between Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong and throwing each other, they could just throw each other, man.
Now, I got a question for you very early on in the discussion for Donkey Kong Country 2. So when you were playing, did you have some sort of like OCD type of thing where you wanted to have every level have Diddy Kong's head or Dixie Kong's head on it? Because when you finish a level, you get to finish with one of them and their icon shows up for completion, completing that level. I would regularly make sure that it's all one person. I feel like if I split between the two, it was just, it was nagging.
You're funny. You're a funny guy. You're one of those people. You sound like a completionist, but not,
The world's laziest completionist.
Exactly. Man, I did not 100% any of these games, so you're talking to the world's laziest completionist. Like, I like the idea of completing things 100%, but rarely do I ever do that.
Well, boy howdy. Well, let me tell you about Donkey Kong Country 2, buddy.
Take it away.
That game is the most fun. It's the most fun to complete. I go about it at least annually, and like you said, it's basically an evolution of one. You got all these themed worlds where most of them have a reoccurring kind of element: lava, swamp, carnival cruise lines, stuff like that. Bramble or whatever, thorns.
Thorns, man.
So,
Thorns.
I didn't realize that bees and monkeys were regular enemies in the natural habitat.
Yes, they
were.
But
man, after DKC 2, I think otherwise.
Man, that level where it's literally just barrel blasting, it was fun and frustrating at the same time because I kept getting lost over and over and over again.
Man.
If we talk about the different levels, this world feels lived in. Like, it feels like it's the Kremling's little carnival. Like, there's literally a carnival level, and all the areas just feel like real.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like each area, it's like, oh, I could see those guys being in that area. When you get to swamp areas, you have the new enemies, the new enemy varieties. Very little do you see a lot of the enemies replicate throughout the game. They usually either have a different outfit on, they have a different color tone to them to show that they're not the same. It's just the little things that kind of make each world really nice.
How many times am I going to be in a beehive? I think the beehive levels, they stuck out to me the most because the only times I ever played the Donkey Kong Country games were at different friends and cousins' houses, and I've always got them mixed up. I didn't know which one was which. But I remember the beehives, or the wasp hives, whatever. I was always deathly afraid of wasps as a kid. So like seeing them in the game, I'm just like, oh, gross. They have spikes now. It's disgusting. And speaking of enemies, the bosses in this game are way better. Like, they don't...
Oh, I love the bosses in this one.
Yeah, they don't all have the same background. They're not just bigger enemies. They're not just bigger standard enemies. Some of them are. Some of them aren't. But they definitely said, hey, we need to get more creative with these bosses.
Yeah, I think the only enemy that reoccurs in the game is Crow, and Crow shows up in the first level and then back in the haunted area.
That's right, and it was a ghost, right? It was a straight up ghost.
Yeah, it was a ghost Crow. He's dead. Spoilers in Gloomy Gulch.
On one hand, Rare is filled with cheeky British humor. On the other hand, it's also that cheeky British existentialism. We're all gonna die, so might as well make a video game about it.
They were developing, man. They definitely put as much as they can into this game as if this was the last platformer they'd ever develop. You have the Lost World, you have all this 100% stuff. We're not even talking about the cameos at the end once you complete it. That's like unheard of in gaming at that time.
And you know how long it took me to realize that the name of the game is Diddy's Kong Quest?
Yeah, you'd think it's Diddy Kong Quest, Diddy Kong's Quest.
I thought for decades it was Diddy Kong's Quest. It's Diddy's Kong Quest.
It's Berenstain Bears all over again, buddy.
Son of a gun! Don't
Sorry.
Don't talk
I
about
had to break it to you.
We'll talk about bears when we talk about Donkey Kong Country 3, but
oh boy.
But yeah, I'm trying to remember Swanky's Bonus Bonanza. I liked that a lot.
I love Swanky's Bonus
The theme
is swanky.
But Swanky's Bonus Bonanza, like, if I wasn't doing the rewind feature over and over and over again, I'd be visiting every one of his game shows, and it's such a...
rewinded the Swanky?
No, I'm not saying I rewound the Swanky. I did not do that. What I'm saying is...
Cheater!
No, Alan, I'm already a cheater by using the rewind feature. Stop it. But what I'm saying is, if I didn't use the rewind feature and just kept racking up lives, I'd be doing every single Bonus Bonanza game show because it rewards you with lives, and it gives you a really good incentive to just focus every little detail that you can in this game. It's very unique, and it was definitely a precursor to more things Rare was going to do, and even Playtonic Games is going to do. Rare seems to like putting in game shows in their games. It's like a game within a game.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of, like, they hid the save files behind a little school with Granny Kong. You had Swanky. I think Funky's in there, right?
Funky's in there, yeah. He lets
Funky's in there. I never used him.
Me either.
So, yeah, Funky is like, unless, like, I think once you beat a world, you're able to just get out of the world. Once, like, when completing it, it's not really necessary to go to Funky. But I will tell you, for completing it, though, it's a lot of fun when the game actually is aware that you're going through and trying to find everything. Like, there are bonus stage, like, barrels everywhere. Like, everywhere you look, you're gonna find one, and then only the real challenge is, like, going to find the ones that you would never find otherwise unless you were actively looking.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a game's very special when it's able to do that, where it's like, okay, we understand there's people that want to casually just play it, and we understand there's people that are gonna probably see that crack in the wall and go, oh, I should probably try to get through that crack in the wall.
Mm-hmm. With some Zelda bombs, you know? Or just...
Yeah, well, I mean, our favorite Rhino is kind of necessary in this specific instance, but
exactly. And you know, it's interesting how sometimes you ride the animals like you did in Donkey Kong Country 1, and then you just literally turn into them for some reason. Yeah,
we had a lot of good... We had Rambi, because we only had in the last game, we had Rambi and Garde, we had gosh, I don't think Squawks is part of it yet. We had the frog, and we had the peacock, or not the peacock, ostrich. There we go.
That's right, the ostrich. How could you forget the ostrich, Alan?
I forgot the ostrich.
I'm a peacock, Captain. You gotta let me fly.
But now we have Rattly and Squitter the spider, Clapper the seal. We had a lot of animal friends to help us out along the way in the second one. You could tell that they were developing their own little universe within the Donkey Kong franchise, and I think that was like, I keep saying unheard of, but it's just so good to have that, because all the times you had other franchises, you didn't really have sequels in the span of one single console.
Oh, man, you know? It's such a rare thing nowadays to have that.
I see what you did.
You see what I did there? I totally meant to do that, but yeah, sometimes I miss the days when games were quicker to make.
Yeah.
You know, without the crunch, of course. But yeah, like, I can't believe we got back-to-back sequels year after year after year, and thus we get to Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. Or is it Dixie's Double Trouble? Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. I was right the first time. And this introduced the best character in all of Donkey Kong Country, Kiddy Kong.
Yay!
We love you, Kitty. You're a good boy. Let's talk about Donkey Kong Country 3. So, my stance is this. It's better than... I think it's better gameplay-wise than Donkey Kong Country 1, gameplay-wise. But it's not as good as Donkey Kong Country 2 in both gameplay and, like, overall presentation. What struck me, though, was this... I realized this was the Donkey Kong Country game I played the most in my youth. This was the one I would always go to my cousin's house, and I think it was the only Donkey Kong Country game they had.
Really?
They probably had 3 and 2. I don't remember. But 3 was the one I remember playing like over and over again over there. At least the first 1 or 2 areas. But that was quite the nostalgia trip when I realized that. But right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, I don't like the setting of this game. I much preferred the tropical forest island landscapes of 1 and 2.
Agreed.
You see, the woodland sort of forest setting is not an unfavorite of mine, but I do think it's kind of off-putting in the Donkey Kong Country sense of things. It felt more like they were trying to appeal more to children. I know, because they're already children's games, it's kind of like, what the heck? But we got Kiddy Kong in there. We have these cartoon bears that you run into that look like they're from a different game entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the bears were there, I was just like, okay, this is taking me out of it. What is this, Nick Jr.? Am I watching Little Bear? Like, what's going on?
It was very, okay, so the third game, nothing wrong to it. It's a really good game, even standing out on its own, even if it wasn't a Donkey Kong game. But yeah, going from number 2, where you have so much going on for it, and then you go to 3 and you add new mechanics. You add weighted, what is it? Kiddy Kong's weighted, so he has less of a jump, but you could also throw him. And you have all these new mechanics level-wise that kind of slow down the pace. I feel like there is cause for, criticism, because it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea immediately. I feel like that's what's great about the trilogy itself. You're always going to find one game out of the 3 that you're really going to like. 3 for me is probably in my least favorites, just because you can't speed past a level. Some of them are a little more convoluted, and I just don't vibe with it.
Yeah, so when people tell me they like Donkey Kong Country 1 more than 3, I'm like, I don't blame you one bit. I do think the levels and the overall gameplay are better designed than 1, but I also feel like they didn't really figure out what made the levels in Donkey Kong Country 2 special. A lot of them felt like they were more simplified, even though they did have the sort of verticality that I liked about Donkey Kong Country 2's levels. Sometimes you're just going up, 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 down, 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 whereas in Donkey Kong Country 1 it was a lot of left and right and left and right.
Oh, it's all left and right pretty much.
It is, yeah.
It's just one large image. That's it.
I didn't feel like it grabbed me as much as it did in Donkey Kong Country 2. I think part of that had to do with the setting. And, rest in peace, David Wise. You were a good composer.
Now, you wrote that in the script, and I got really confused for a second and honestly scared. But for those interested, the music in Donkey Kong Country 3 is, I would probably say, the weakest of the entire trilogy. Is that safe to say? There
are some good tracks in there, I will say.
There's some slappers.
There are some slappers, but yeah, it's noticeably not David Wise returning for this.
I feel like once you hit Donkey Kong Country 2, the music is the game, you know what I mean? It's the identity now, it's not just the environments, it's how cohesive the music and the environments shake hands, say hello, they go for a coffee, and they're together, they're a thing. I feel like the third game, it feels like they brought David Wise. I don't know what he was doing at the time. I think he was overseeing the project, but he wasn't directly producing the content. And because of that, there were levels that felt very much incoherent, a little disconnected from the environment, and it kind of suffered a little bit to me.
I think the problem with Donkey Kong Country 3 in general is just the overall aesthetic of it all, the overall presentation. It's much more childish too, especially when you play as the elephant or ride the elephant in that game. That elephant looks like it's ripped right out of Dumbo, and it's kind of... It just looks weird. It looks funny to me. It doesn't look like it's ready to go to hell and back with Diddy Kong and with Dixie Kong, and Kiddy Kong. It's just there to look cute for the kids that are playing it. But I will say there were some pretty darn good bosses in this one.
I think the boss is really on point with this game.
Absolutely, especially the one with the snowman, where it turns into an arcade shooter. I thought, wow, this is a welcome change of pace. I wish more of the bosses were like that, because a lot of the other ones are kind of just some cheap hits here and there. But that one was really nice change of pace.
Yeah, I agree. I think the third one, if I had to sum it up, is, wow, look how far they've gone from Donkey Kong Country 1. And I mean that in a good way. The game, the graphics have become it's so unique and iconic now at this point. The music itself has kind of gone a completely different direction from the first one, like where it was really soothing, really calm music. Now it's sometimes bombastic, but at the same time they've figured out their tone and they've kind of stuck with it.
I understand why people think Country 3 is the weakest Donkey Kong Country game, but for me, it was still a welcome surprise. I did like some of the levels in there. I did think it was overall a more creative game than 1, but not as creative as Donkey Kong Country 2 was. But can we talk about how King K. Rool always changes his name in every game?
I love that.
That's so good. King K. Rool in the first game. The second one was Captain K. Rool. The third one was my favorite, Baron K. Rulenstein.
Yeah, Baron K. Rulenstein. Oh my goodness.
Heck yeah. I was like...
Say what you will about his plans, but his costumes and his naming is impeccable.
It's on point. He's changing his name every time. It's canon. He has a wife. I don't know what the deal is with their marriage, but he has a wife, and we never see her. But apparently he made the giant robot that's in Donkey Kong Country 3 out of her like pots and pans.
Are you serious?
Did you not read the dialogue at the end of the game? He says
I don't think I did.
Yeah, he's like, my wife's gonna be furious. I made that out of her favorite pots and pans. I'm like,
That's
man.
funny.
You literally are a genius if you made like a flying robot. You literally put Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong inside of it, Dr. Robotnik style. You're a genius.
You telling me you made a whole ship out of Williams-Sonoma?
Yes. My goodness. Man, oh man. King K. Rool needs to come back.
He has to.
He has to. Let's talk about that rumored Donkey Kong game. Not Donkey Kong Country, according to the rumors, but a new Donkey Kong game set in the 2D perspective, being made by the Super Mario Odyssey developers at Nintendo EPD. That's part of the reason why I decided to play these games over the weekend, because I need to know what I want from this next Donkey Kong game, if it's real. Which, you know, when there's smoke, there's fire. There's probably something to these rumors, but it makes me think, what could Nintendo EPD do to make this Donkey Kong game one to remember?
I think first off, we already can trust them on the graphics department.
Absolutely.
It's gonna look stunning, first and foremost. Like if they make Odyssey look just amazing, and that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and probably even longer than that for development. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine what they're going to be doing now.
I can't imagine either. Like, will this game look more like a Tropical Freeze, or will it look shinier? It'll probably look shinier. Maybe it'll be set in New Donk City because, you know, same creators. So it's just a lot to think about. But rumor has it, and this is like the number one thing I want to come back. Rumor has it that the Kremlings are going to be back as the enemy, and but no mention of King K. Rool. But
well,
I think
if the Kremlings are back,
that means he's gotta come back.
There's Croc, there's Rool.
Yes, thank you. When there's Gex, there's Texas. I don't know. We're talking about lizards in video games. King K. Rool's the most iconic of them all. Will he come back as a different? Will he come back as a different alter ego, like Elon Musk or something?
Okay, you're making a prediction that you don't understand how much I would cry if that happened. Elon Musk, that's perfect.
Oh,
Elon
man.
Muskenstein.
Terrible, absolutely terrible. Yeah, and they gotta give him like that colorful personality back. Like this dude was such a goofball in all 3 games. Maybe not the first one as much. He was just a stereotypical villain. But like 2 and 3, they gave him like, just the fact that he gave himself different alter egos every time was just like, okay, you bothered to change your rank 3 times. You went to medical school to become a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And then even in past that Donkey Kong Country lore, they continued that with Donkey Kong 64. They didn't precisely change his name, but they made him based off of a GoldenEye, or not GoldenEye, but just 007 James Bond-esque villain. And then he became a boxer out of nowhere. Where did he get his boxing license? I want to see it.
Exactly. Like, show us the receipts, King K. What are you gonna do? The future of Donkey Kong remains uncertain, but hopefully we'll see a new Donkey Kong game at this E3. I hope the Kremlings are back, and I hope K. Rool returns. But Alan, what do you want to come back?
I want, which I don't know if it's not that I don't trust EPD. You usually have to tend to trust EPD, but it's going to be a completely different game if EPD is working on it. They definitely have a different vision. I don't think they're going to completely steal, or not steal, but, copy, note per note, the Donkey Kong Country soundtracks. I don't think they're going to take a lot of the platforming out, because a lot of the platforming now is basically the base of most platformers now, It's kind of set the groundwork. So whether Nintendo kind of just copies what made the original so great or goes on their own, I'm just excited that they make partners back. I just want to see Diddy Kong. I want to see Dixie Kong. I just want to see them. Anything Donkey Kong, yes please, thank you.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, because if the rumors are true, like, they're not going to call it Donkey Kong Country because they have no interest in making sequels to games they weren't a part of. What does that mean? Like, how much different are they going to try to make this 2D Donkey Kong game compared to, like, Donkey Kong Country? And, they have a lot of pressure because Tropical Freeze is, like, one of the best 2D platformers of all time, not just one of the best Donkey Kong games of all time. So it's going to be interesting to see what this rumored Donkey Kong game is going to be, if it's true.
Well, we only have very much a week to find out. And
yeah, like less than 2 weeks to go.
Oh my goodness, I'm nervous. It's Star Fox Grand Prix all over again.
Oh no, don't bring it up. But thank you all so much for watching. What do you think of the Donkey Kong Country trilogy? Let us know in the comments section down below. Thank you once again for joining me, Alan. Tell us where we can find you.
It's a pleasure as always, man. You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Alonzo Mega.
Awesome. And well, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to check out the videos on the right for more topics that you might be interested in, and subscribe to GameXplain for more discussions like this one. Until next time, bye.
Bye-bye.